All right, so the final thing we're going to talk about in our ethics and culture unit is how do we actually understand cultural diversity? So remember that everybody's ethnic and cultural beliefs are going to affect their behavior. We as healthcare workers have to be aware of those beliefs and able to provide that holistic care, which is care that provides for the well being of the whole person and meets all of their needs, whether that's physical, social, emotional, or mental. So, we're going to touch on all of these little areas of cultural diversity, but things like family organization, personal space, language, touching, time orientation, eye contact, gestures, healthcare beliefs, spirituality, and religion. Now, I will tell you this is a long lecture, so we're going to break it up into two parts, and we're just going to do the first half today. So, family organization is basically the structure of the family or who is the dominant or decision making person. All families are going to vary in their composition and in the different roles that family members play, but it's really going to affect care of children, sick people, and the elderly. When we look at our nuclear families, this is a mother and a father, or any set of two parents, two men, two women, whatever the family is made of, and their children. This tends to be our basic unit in European American families. Now, extended family is important, but they don't usually live in the same household. When we look at care for our children or our sick or our elderly relatives, someone outside of the home is going to be the one that typically provides that. Kids go to daycare or a babysitter. If someone's sick, we send them to the hospital. And then our elderly relatives we see usually in the nursing home or assisted living facility. Whereas extended families have the nuclear family and grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. We tend to see this as a primary unit in Asian, Hispanic, and Native American families. So as a result, we see that many different generations are going to live in the same household. When family members get sick, we see other family members taking care of them instead of people outside of the home. For instance, in a lot of Asian families, they take a lot of respect in caring for their elders and consider it more of a privilege to care for them. So they would be pretty upset to see someone shipped off to a nursing home. Now, when we look at decision making, we've got patriarchal families where the father or the oldest male is considered the authority figure. So that person will be the one making healthcare decisions for all family members. This includes husbands making decisions for their wives. So you may see someone from Asian or Middle Eastern culture that believes that the male has that power and authority, and so women are expected to be obedient. No matter what the family dynamic is, if someone tells you they want to go home and discuss something with their spouse first, we need to give them that time and space to do that. When we see matriarchal families, these are where the mother or oldest female is the authoritative figure and going to be the person that's making healthcare decisions for all families. Nowadays, we don't necessarily see as significant of a break between patriarchal or matriarchal. A lot of times we see the mother and the father share those decisions. But again, we do have to respect if someone wants to check in with someone else before they make a decision. Now, again, remember that sometimes patients may have more family members if they have a bigger family unit or are a part of that extended family unit. And family themselves may want to do some of those basic care tasks. They may want to bathe the patient or groom them. And that's okay as long as it fits with whatever the patient's illness or medical problem is. If it's not going to cause any issues, then we should let them go ahead and do that. So the United States doesn't have a official language, but we do know that the dominant language is English. We also know that a lot of other languages are still spoken. And with that, all those different languages tend to have different dialects. So it's not necessarily going to be uncommon that you encounter a patient who doesn't speak English, or English isn't their first language, so they may not be super fluent in it. We want to make sure we clarify how the patient's communication ability is, and then remember, always get an interpreter if needed. We've talked about this before, but we want to make sure we always provide any handouts or materials in the patient's primary language. Personal space and touch. So, how comfortable is someone, or what distance do they need between other people to feel comfortable interacting? We may see this called someone's territorial spaces, and it's going to vary a lot between ethnic and cultural groups. Some may be considered close contact, others may be more distant contact. And there also, with everything else, may be variations within each of those groups. For instance, we see that women often tend to stand closer together than men, and children stand closer together than adults. So some of these closer contact cultures, as a result, individuals are going to be more comfortable standing close together, perhaps even touching the person they're interacting with. Some examples we have, Arabic culture, often they touch, feel, and even smell the person with whom they're interacting. French and Latin Americans are going to stand very close together while they talk. And then some of our other Hispanic Americans may use hugs or handshakes to greet other people, which, depending on who you're talking to, may not be the most well-received greeting. That's why it's important that we always read the other person and kind of adapt to what everyone in the group is comfortable with. Some of our distant contact cultures, again, remember everybody's an individual, so this never is going to apply to 100% of people in the culture. But for instance, European and African Americans, we tend to prefer some space, perhaps 2 to 4 feet when we're actually doing the interaction, but the initial greeting may be a little bit closer, whether it's a handshake or a hug. Asian Americans may stand close together, but don't touch. Kissing and hugging is considered a very intimate part of their relationship, so it's not done in public. And the Vietnamese culture allows that only the elderly touch the head of a child because the head is considered sacred. The one thing to remember is that working in healthcare, you have to touch and get in the personal space of other people. That's why it's extremely, extremely important that you're always explaining what you're doing, getting consent, and encouraging the patient to be able to relax or talking them through as things are happening. Remember to pay attention to those verbal and nonverbal cues and determine any patient preferences by talking to them, asking them questions. Do you prefer this versus this? Give them those options, especially if it's available. Time orientation. This is sometimes a little difficult to grasp, but it's how we look at the past, present, or future passage of time. People that are past oriented are going to value tradition, tend to do things the way they've always been done. They may not want to try new procedures. They may prefer to treat things the way they've always been treated. The book gives us cultures in England, Austria, Japan, and China. I don't know how true that is for England or for the other cultures, but these are just the examples that are given to us. Present-oriented is where we're concentrated on what's going on right now. I want instant gratification. I don't worry about how my behavior is going to affect me later. They don't really have a lot of concern about the future. And as a result, they may neglect some of those preventative healthcare measures like vaccines or regular doctor checkups. They tend to be willing to get treatment if they're sick, but not likely to follow up if they start to feel better. Some examples our book gives us are Middle Easterners, Hispanics, and Latin Americans. I would even argue that Americans or United States citizens are starting to fall into this present-oriented category, but our book says that we fall more here in future-oriented, where we set long-term goals. We try to anticipate things that can be followed or done to prevent future problems. Might be willing to take risks to achieve those goals, and we're more likely to take preventative healthcare measures to ensure better health as we get older. So, again, the examples we have are the United States, Canada, and Brazil. Healthcare as a whole tends to function on a present-oriented time structure because we've got everything happening right now, whether that's scheduled appointments, routines for patients, prescriptions or things that need to happen at a specific time. So we want to make those efforts to recognize how different people may be time-oriented and find ways to help motivate them. So how can we help someone, for instance, who's chronically late or who misses their appointments? Now, whether that's telling them the appointment's earlier than it really is, or helping them arrange for transportation, how are we going to help that person so that they're not missing out on the care that they need? Eye contact, we've talked a little bit about this before. It's going to be affected by different cultural beliefs. So being open to understanding that some different cultures have different beliefs about eye contact is understanding that these different cultures have different beliefs about eye contact is going to help avoid some misunderstandings potentially, because we're going to want to pay attention to the comfort level of our patient. Remember that if someone's not showing you direct eye contact, it doesn't mean they're not listening. In their culture, it may just be a sign of respect. So again, just some examples. We might see someone from Europe who regards eye contact as an indication of interest and trustworthiness. So people that look away are not trustworthy or not paying attention. Some Asian Americans may consider direct eye contact to be rude. Native Americans we may see use side vision or peripheral vision and avoid direct eye contact because direct eye contact could be considered hostile or threatening. And then we see Muslim women avoid eye contact as a sign of modesty. Same thing as eye contact when we talk about gestures. Remember, these are used to communicate non-verbally. So for instance, in the United States, when we nod our head up and down, it means yes. Side to side, it means no. However, in India, these are the opposite motions. So we could be very confused by someone who is saying yes or no, but meaning the opposite of what we think they're saying. We have to be aware of how people respond to hand gestures. If someone seems uncomfortable, just don't do it again. Now, I know that was a lot. We're going to take a break here. We'll finish up with the second half tomorrow. But if you have any questions, please just let me know, and I'll see you tomorrow.